Get on your knees and clean that up, girl. That's where your kind belongs. Richard Sterling's voice cut through Le Chateau's crystal silence. The billionaire towered over the black waitress as red wine dripped from his overturned glass. I said on your knees! Diane Carter's hands trembled, but her voice stayed steady. Sir, I can clean this. Don't talk back! Sterling's face flushed crimson. I own half this city. You're nothing! The marble floor reflected chandelier light as Diane slowly knelt, her uniform soaking up wine. Sterling's leather shoes gleamed inches from her face. Then he did the unthinkable. The billionaire leaned down and spat directly onto her forehead. Saliva slid down her cheek as gasps echoed through the dining room. Remember your place. But Sterling had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Because sometimes the person you think is powerless holds all the cards. Have you ever seen someone's worst moment become their final moment? 3 months earlier, Diane Carter's alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m. in her modest Queens apartment. The morning light filtered through thin curtains as she rolled out of bed with military precision. No wasted movements, no hesitation. She walked to her kitchen counter where a stack of surveillance photos lay scattered beside her coffee maker. Richard Sterling's face stared back at her from a dozen different angles, entering his Manhattan penthouse, stepping out of his Maserati, shaking hands with men whose names appeared on terrorist watch lists. The coffee aroma filled the small space as Diane studied the latest intelligence briefing. Sterling Enterprises had moved $50 million through offshore accounts in the past 6 months. Money that traced back to weapons deals with organizations that wanted Americans dead. Her encrypted phone buzzed with a text from Detective Sarah Mitchell, her CIA handler. Phase 2 approved. Restaurant placement confirmed. Stay sharp. Diane walked to her bedroom closet and pulled out a crisp black uniform, white collar, black skirt, sensible shoes, the outfit of a Le Chateau waitress. She'd worn designer suits to brief senators, tactical gear to raid compounds, but this simple uniform would be her most important disguise yet. Standing before her bathroom mirror, she practiced the submissive posture she'd perfected over weeks of training. Eyes down, shoulders slightly hunched, voice soft and apologetic, everything opposite to her natural commanding presence. The woman in the mirror looked like someone who could be dismissed, ignored, underestimated. Perfect. Le Chateau sat on Manhattan's Upper East Side like a gleaming jewel, its floor-to-ceiling windows revealing crystal chandeliers and tables draped in white linen. Diane had studied every corner of this restaurant through surveillance footage. She knew which tables had the best acoustics for recording conversations, which angles avoided security cameras, where emergency exits led. The lunch crowd was Sterling's favorite hunting ground. Every Tuesday and Thursday at exactly 12:30 p.m., he claimed his corner booth, Table 7, where he could see everyone while keeping his back to the wall. Old habits from a man who'd made too many enemies. But Sterling thought his enemies were business rivals and disgruntled employees. He had no idea the federal government had been watching him for 2 years. Maria Santos, a fellow waitress, showed Diane around the staff areas during her first week. The kitchen bustled with controlled chaos. Orders flying, plates clattering, the sizzle of pans over open flames, the scent of garlic and fresh herbs mixed with the sharp tang of wine vinegar. Table 7 is the worst, Maria whispered as they restocked napkins. That billionaire thinks he owns the place, treats us like dirt, especially. She glanced at Diane's skin color and lowered her voice further. Especially girls like us. James Wellington, the restaurant manager, was a thin British man who spoke in clipped tones and wore his servility like cologne, thick and obvious. During a staff meeting, he made Sterling's preferences crystal clear. Mr. Sterling expects perfection. No delays, no mistakes, no attitude. He's not just a customer, he's an investor. 15% ownership means he gets whatever he wants whenever he wants it. The other servers nodded knowingly. They'd all felt Sterling's wrath at some point. Sarah, a young Latina server, had been reduced to tears when Sterling complained about her accent being unprofessional. Marcus, one of the few black servers, had been banned from serving Sterling's table after the billionaire claimed he looked suspicious. Diane absorbed every detail while maintaining her cover. She memorized staff schedules, customer patterns, and security protocols. But most importantly, she studied Richard Sterling himself. He arrived each Tuesday in a different luxury car, today a silver Maserati, last week a black Bentley. His personal security detail always swept the restaurant first, checking exits and positioning themselves at strategic points. Sterling treated these precautions like a game, enjoying the attention and the fear. His business associates ranged from legitimate defense contractors to men who spoke in coded language about shipments and transfers. Diane's trained ear caught fragments of conversations about Senate votes, classified contracts, and payments to offshore accounts. The restaurant's wealthy clientele provided perfect cover for Sterling's meetings. Conversations about stock portfolios and summer homes in the Hamptons masked discussions of weapons deals and political bribes. Champagne glasses clinked while blood money changed hands. During her second week, Diane witnessed Sterling's treatment of staff firsthand. A young server accidentally brushed against Sterling's chair while clearing the adjacent table. Sterling's reaction was swift and vicious. "Watch where you're going, you clumsy fool. Do you know how much this suit costs? More than you make in a year." The server, barely 20 years old, stammered apologies while Sterling continued his verbal assault. Other diners looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Wellington appeared instantly, smoothing over the situation with free desserts and promises that it won't happen again. This was Sterling's kingdom, and everyone in it knew their place. Diane's CIA training had prepared her for many scenarios, but nothing quite like this. She'd interrogated terrorists, survived firefights, and gone months undercover in hostile territories. But enduring daily humiliation while serving soup and salad tested different muscles entirely. Her apartment became a sanctuary where she could drop the act. After each shift, she'd transmit intelligence to her handlers using encrypted communication devices hidden in everyday objects. A pen that photographed documents, earrings that recorded conversations, a watch that tracked Sterling's movements. The evidence was building slowly but surely. Financial records, recorded conversations, photographs of meetings with known terrorists. Each piece of the puzzle brought them closer to dismantling Sterling's network and saving lives. But the personal cost was mounting too. 3 months of swallowing pride, accepting disrespect, and pretending to be powerless was wearing on her soul. Every night she reminded herself why it mattered. Tomorrow would bring another day of serving the man who funded terror while playing the role of respectable businessman. And Diane would be ready. The lunch rush at Le Chateau moved like clockwork until Richard Sterling's voice shattered the elegant calm. "Are you deaf or just stupid? I said no ice in my water." Diane had been serving Sterling's table for exactly 43 seconds when his first attack came. She'd placed the crystal water glass beside his bread plate, following standard service protocol. The ice cubes clinked softly against expensive crystals. "I apologize, Mr. Sterling. Let me get you—" "Don't apologize, just fix it." His cold gray eyes swept over her dismissively. "And next time, listen when someone's talking to you." The businessman sitting across from Sterling, Senator Morrison's chief of staff, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He'd come to discuss defense contracts worth $200 million. Instead, he was watching Sterling humiliate restaurant staff. Diane returned with fresh water, no ice. Her hands remained steady despite the familiar burn of injustice. 3 months of this treatment, and her CIA training was the only thing keeping her from responding. "Better," Sterling said without looking up from his menu. "Maybe you people can learn after all." The phrase hit like a slap. You people. The same dismissive language he'd used dozens of times before, always delivered with that particular tone that made clear exactly what he meant. But today felt different. Sterling's stress levels were elevated. Diane could read the signs. His defense contracts were under federal review. His offshore accounts had been flagged by international banking authorities. Unknown to him, his entire criminal network was unraveling, which made him more dangerous and more reckless. "We'll start with the lobster bisque," Sterling announced, snapping his menu shut. "And make sure it's actually hot this time. Your kitchen seems to have temperature control issues." Diane nodded professionally. "Of course, sir, and for you, Mr. Patterson?" Patterson, the chief of staff, ordered quickly, clearly wanting to minimize interaction. These men had serious business to discuss, and Sterling's treatment of the staff was making him nervous. As Diane walked away, she heard Sterling's voice drop to conversational level. Her enhanced hearing, trained through years of intelligence work, caught every word. "The senator's vote is guaranteed," Sterling was saying. "50,000 in his campaign fund, another 100 in his wife's consulting contract. Small price for a $200 million defense deal. Bribery, spoken casually over bread and butter in Manhattan's finest restaurant. Diane's micro-recording device, hidden in her pen, captured every syllable. But she needed more. The names of the defense contractors, the specific weapon systems, the timeline for implementation. She returned with the bisque, placing it carefully before Sterling. The ceramic bowl was precisely 165 degrees. She'd checked personally. Sterling lifted his spoon, tasted, and his face immediately darkened. "This is lukewarm garbage. What's wrong with your kitchen staff? Are they as incompetent as the servers?" The soup was perfect. Diane knew because she'd tested it herself. But Sterling wasn't interested in temperature. He was establishing dominance, asserting control in front of his guest. "I'll have them prepare a fresh bowl immediately," Diane said, reaching for the ceramic dish. Sterling's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. His grip was firm, possessive, designed to inflict discomfort without leaving marks. "Did I say you could take it away?" His voice was quiet, dangerous. "I said it was garbage. I didn't say I was finished with it." Patterson stared at his own soup, clearly uncomfortable with the display, but he said nothing. Men like him had careers built on saying nothing when powerful people misbehaved. Sterling's grip tightened. "You'll stand right there until I decide what to do with this mess. Maybe that'll teach you people some patience." The pain in Diane's wrist was manageable. The humiliation was calculated, but the intelligence opportunity was priceless. While Sterling held her there like a possession, Patterson was checking his phone, revealing text messages about the Caracas shipment and Syrian end users, weapons flowing to Syria through Venezuela. The terrorist connection was becoming clearer. "Please, Mr. Sterling," Diane said, injecting just enough tremor into her voice to sound genuinely distressed. "You're hurting me." "Am I?" Sterling's smile was cold. "Good. Maybe pain will improve your memory." He released her wrist suddenly, causing her to stumble slightly backward. The movement was perfectly timed, just as the restaurant's security camera turned toward their table. But Sterling had made a mistake. In asserting his dominance, he'd forgotten about the micro-camera in Diane's pen. The device had captured every second of his assault, including his admission of enjoying her pain. "Now," Sterling continued, "take this swill back to your kitchen and tell them to try again. And if they screw up a third time, maybe we'll discuss your employment status." Diane lifted the bowl with both hands, noting how Sterling's eyes followed her movements. He was enjoying this. The power, the control, the ability to humiliate someone without consequences. Or so he thought. As she walked toward the kitchen, Diane heard Patterson's nervous voice. "Richard, perhaps we should discuss the contracts more privately." "Nonsense," Sterling replied loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "These people are invisible. They don't matter. Now, about those Syrian buyers." The words hung in the air like a confession. Sterling's arrogance was making him careless, his prejudice making him stupid. He was discussing international weapons trafficking in a public restaurant because he genuinely believed the staff were beneath notice. In the kitchen, Diane quickly uploaded the recorded conversation to her encrypted server. Patterson's text messages, Sterling's bribery admission, the Syrian connection, all documented and transmitted to federal prosecutors within minutes. Chef Rodriguez looked up from his prep station. "The soup was at perfect temperature. I checked it myself." "I know," Diane said quietly. "He's not interested in the soup." She returned with an identical bowl, same temperature, same seasoning. Sterling tasted it theatrically, nodded approval, and resumed his conversation as if she'd ceased to exist. But Diane continued listening. Over the next hour, she gathered names, dates, financial details, and shipping schedules. Sterling's entire terrorist financing operation laid bare over lobster and wine. The irony was perfect. His prejudice, his need to assert dominance over people he considered inferior, was providing federal investigators with everything they needed to destroy him. As the lunch meeting concluded, Sterling left his customary 15% tip, calculated to the penny, delivered with condescending precision. "Better service next time," he said, not looking at Diane. "Maybe you'll work your way up to compete eventually." Patterson hurried away, clearly disturbed by what he'd witnessed, but Sterling lingered, savoring his dominance display. "You know what your problem is?" he said, standing close enough that other diners couldn't hear. "You people think you deserve respect, but respect is earned. And frankly, I don't see anything worth respecting here." Diane kept her eyes down, her posture submissive, her voice carefully modulated. "Yes, sir. Thank you for the feedback." "That's better." Sterling smiled. "Humility suits you. Remember that." He walked away, leaving Diane standing beside the empty table with its scattered crumbs and wine stains. To everyone watching, she was just another service worker who'd been put in her place. But Sterling had just given a federal agent everything she needed to end his criminal empire. His prejudice had become his weakness, his arrogance, his downfall. 3 hours later, Diane transmitted the final intelligence package to Washington. Financial records, recorded conversations, photographic evidence, witness testimony, a complete case ready for prosecution. Soon, very soon, Richard Sterling would learn that the person he'd spent months humiliating was the one person with power to destroy him completely. The hunter had become the hunted. He just didn't know it yet. 2 weeks later, Richard Sterling entered Le Chateau with 3 foreign defense contractors and a briefcase full of classified documents. Today's meeting would finalize weapons deals worth $500 million, money that would flow directly to terrorist organizations. Diane watched from across the dining room as Sterling's security team swept the restaurant. They checked exits, positioned themselves strategically, and signaled all clear. Sterling strode to table 7 like a king claiming his throne. The autumn rain drummed against floor-to-ceiling windows as Manhattan's elite filled their usual spots. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across marble floors while soft jazz played from hidden speakers. The scent of truffle oil and aged wine created an atmosphere of refined luxury, but beneath the elegance lurked something darker. "Table 7 requires immediate service," Wellington announced to the staff. "Mr. Sterling is hosting very important guests today." Diane straightened her uniform and approached the corner booth. Sterling's guests spoke in hushed tones about cargo manifests and customs arrangements while studying documents marked with classified stamps. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," Diane said, positioning herself slightly behind Sterling's left shoulder. "May I start you with beverages?" Sterling didn't acknowledge her presence. He continued discussing Syrian rebel factions with a man whose accent suggested Eastern European origins. Another guest, clearly Middle Eastern, showed photographs of weapons stockpiles on his phone. "We'll need the usual," Sterling finally said without looking up, "and make sure the soup course is properly heated this time. Your kitchen's incompetence nearly ruined my last meeting." Diane had served Sterling dozens of times over 3 months. Every interaction followed the same pattern: dismissal, condescension, and carefully calculated humiliation. But today felt different. The stakes were higher, the tension thicker. She returned with beverages and Sterling's favorite appetizer course. The conversations continued around her as if she were furniture. Details about shipping routes through Venezuela, contact codes for Syrian buyers, payment schedules through offshore accounts. Her micro-recording devices captured everything while she maintained perfect service facade. "The soup course, gentlemen," Diane announced 20 minutes later, placing bowls of butternut squash bisque before each guest. The ceramic was precisely heated, the garnish artfully arranged. Sterling lifted his spoon and tasted, his expression immediately soured. "This is barely warm," he declared, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "How many times do I have to explain basic temperature control?" The soup was 168 degrees, Diane had verified personally. But Sterling's complaint wasn't about temperature. It was about power, control, and the need to assert dominance before his criminal associates. "I apologize, Mr. Sterling. I'll have the kitchen." "You'll stand right there," Sterling interrupted, his voice sharp with authority. "Don't move until I decide what to do about this incompetence." The dining room's energy shifted. Conversations quieted as wealthy patrons turned to observe the unfolding drama. Sterling's guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, but none intervened. "Sir, I can get you fresh soup immediately," Diane offered, keeping her voice respectful despite the burning humiliation. "Did I ask for your suggestions?" Sterling's gray eyes were ice cold. "You people are all the same, making excuses instead of taking responsibility." The phrase hung in the air like poison. You people, delivered with that particular emphasis that made his meaning crystal clear to everyone listening. Your slow, lazy service is exactly why your kind will never amount to anything, Sterling continued, his voice carrying across the restaurant. No work ethic, no attention to detail, no respect for quality. Diane's hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the enormous effort required to maintain her cover. 3 months of systematic abuse had tested every limit of her professional training. Now, Sterling said, rising from his chair to tower over her, maybe this will teach you to pay attention to basic requirements. Without warning, he grabbed the soup bowl and held it inches from Diane's face. The ceramic was hot enough to burn skin, the bisque thick enough to stain permanently. You're going to stand perfectly still, he said quietly, his voice barely audible to his guests but clearly heard by nearby diners. And maybe the heat will help you remember proper service standards. The restaurant had gone completely silent. Even the jazz music seemed to fade as dozens of witnesses watched Sterling threaten to burn a server's face with hot soup. But then he did something even worse. Sterling pulled the bowl away and instead leaned forward, gathering saliva in his mouth. The sound was audible, disgusting, deliberate. "This is what I think of your pathetic excuse for service," he whispered. Then he spat directly into Diane's face. The saliva hit her forehead and slid down her cheek in a warm, humiliating trail. Gasps echoed through the dining room as wealthy patrons recoiled in shock. Sterling's own guests stared in appalled silence. "That's what slow service gets you," Sterling announced, his voice now carrying to every corner of the restaurant. "Maybe next time you'll remember to do your job properly." Diane stood frozen, the spit still wet on her face, while dozens of Manhattan's elite watched her degradation. Camera phones emerged from purses and pockets as the scene burned itself into social media forever. But Sterling wasn't finished. "Clean yourself up," he commanded, tossing his linen napkin at her feet. "You look exactly like what you are. Disgusting." The napkin landed on her polished shoes, a final symbol of complete dehumanization. Sterling had reduced her to something less than human before a room full of witnesses. His guests shifted uncomfortably, clearly disturbed by the display. The Eastern European contractor whispered something about inappropriate behavior, while the Middle Eastern buyer checked his watch as if planning an escape. "Gentlemen," Sterling said, settling back into his chair with obvious satisfaction, "let's continue our business discussion. Some people need to learn their place before real work can proceed." Diane bent slowly to retrieve the napkin, her movements carefully controlled despite the rage burning in her chest. As she wiped her face, her training kicked in. Every humiliation was being recorded. Every witness was memorizing Sterling's behavior. Every second of degradation was building the case that would destroy him. Wellington appeared instantly, his face flushed with embarrassment and fear. "Mr. Sterling, perhaps I could—" "You could ensure your staff understands basic service standards." Sterling cut him off. "This girl's incompetence is reflecting poorly on your establishment." The manager turned to Diane with apologetic eyes but spoke the words his job required. "Please return to the kitchen and compose yourself. I'll handle Mr. Sterling's table personally." As Diane walked away on unsteady legs, she heard Sterling's voice resume business discussions. Weapon specifications, delivery timelines, payment methods, all continuing as if spitting on a human being was merely a minor interruption. But his cruelty had accomplished something Sterling never intended. The foreign contractors were visibly disturbed. Their body language suggested discomfort. Their voices carried new hesitation. Sterling's racism was making them question his judgment, his character, his reliability as a business partner. In the kitchen, Diane locked herself in the staff bathroom and allowed 3 months of suppressed emotion to surface. Tears of rage mixed with tears of humiliation as she stared at her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back had been spat on, degraded, dehumanized before dozens of witnesses. But she was also a federal agent who had just recorded a billionaire's confession to international terrorism. Her encrypted phone buzzed with an urgent message from Detective Mitchell. "Extraction approved. You have enough evidence. End this now." But Diane knew the mission wasn't complete. Sterling's guests were finalizing weapons transfers that would kill innocent people. She needed the shipping details, the payment codes, the final pieces of evidence that would shut down the entire network. She cleaned her face, straightened her uniform, and returned to the dining room. Sterling's table was deep in conversation about Syrian logistics and Caracas coordination hubs. For the next hour, she endured additional humiliation while gathering the final intelligence. Sterling seemed energized by his earlier display, becoming more openly cruel with each interaction. "Refill my water," he commanded without looking up. "And try not to spill it this time. Your people's coordination problems are legendary." When she complied perfectly, he found new complaints. "Wrong side of the glass. Don't they teach you anything in whatever schools you attend?" His guests grew increasingly uncomfortable with each racist remark. By the meal's end, 2 of the 3 contractors had expressed serious reservations about moving forward with weapons deals. Sterling's prejudice was destroying his own criminal enterprise. As the meeting concluded, Diane had everything federal prosecutors needed: financial records, shipping manifests, contact information, recorded confessions, a complete intelligence package ready for immediate action. But she also had something else. The viral video footage of Sterling spitting on a black waitress, already spreading across social media platforms with hashtags like #racistbillionaire and #justicefordiane. Sterling had no idea that his moment of cruelest triumph was about to become his complete destruction. The trap was set. The evidence was overwhelming. The public was outraged. Soon, very soon, Richard Sterling would learn that his slow waitress held the power to end his freedom forever. The viral video had been viewed 50 million times by the time Richard Sterling returned to Le Chateau the following Thursday. #JusticeForDiane was trending globally, but Sterling remained oblivious, protected by his bubble of wealth and privilege. He entered the restaurant with his usual arrogance, flanked by bodyguards and radiating entitlement. The dining room felt different today. Conversations hushed when he passed. Staff avoided eye contact. Even regular customers seemed to watch his movements with newfound scrutiny. But Sterling noticed none of it. His mind was focused on the final phase of his weapons deals, the transfers that would net him $200 million in profit. "Table 7, he announced to Wellington, who appeared pale and nervous. "I'm expecting Detective Sarah Mitchell to join me for lunch. Business consultation." Diane felt her pulse quicken. Mitchell was her CIA handler, arriving under deep cover as a private security consultant. The endgame was beginning. Sterling settled into his corner booth and immediately began his familiar routine of dominance and control. "I'll need perfect service today," he told Diane without looking at her. "No delays, no mistakes, no excuses." "Of course, Mr. Sterling," Diane replied, her voice carrying just the right note of submissive compliance. 20 minutes later, Detective Mitchell arrived, dressed in an expensive business suit, carrying a briefcase that contained federal arrest warrants and asset seizure orders. She looked like any other high-powered consultant meeting a wealthy client. "Mr. Sterling," Mitchell said, settling into the booth across from him, "thank you for agreeing to this consultation about your security concerns." "The federal investigation is becoming problematic," Sterling said, diving straight into criminal territory. "I need those evidence files to disappear permanently." Mitchell nodded professionally while the micro-recording devices captured every word. "That can be arranged. But first, I need to understand the full scope of your operations." Sterling's arrogance made him careless. Over the next 30 minutes, he detailed his entire criminal network: the Syrian weapons deals, the Venezuelan money laundering, the bribes to Senator Morrison, the terrorist financing schemes. All of it was recorded. All of it admissible in federal court. Diane served their meals while gathering the final pieces of evidence. Sterling's briefcase contained shipping manifests, payment authorizations, and contact lists for terrorist organizations. Her micro camera captured every document. But then Sterling's paranoia suddenly activated. "Wait," he said, studying Mitchell more carefully. "I don't recognize you from our previous communications. Show me some identification." Mitchell's cover story was perfect, but Sterling's survival instincts were finally kicking in. His hand moved toward the panic button that would summon his security team. That's when he noticed Diane standing beside their table, no longer the submissive waitress he'd been tormenting for months. Her posture had changed, shoulders back, chin up, eyes meeting him directly for the first time. The transformation was startling, from victim to predator in a single moment. "Richard Sterling," Diane said, her voice carrying absolute authority as she reached into her uniform pocket. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation." Sterling's eyes widened as Diane produced a gold badge and federal credentials. The leather wallet flipped open to reveal Agent Diane Carter, Central Intelligence Agency. The color drained from Sterling's face as the implications hit him like a physical blow. 3 months of racist abuse, systematic humiliation, and careless criminal confessions, all directed at a federal agent with the power to destroy him. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit terrorism, international weapons trafficking, money laundering, and bribery of federal officials," Diane continued, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent restaurant. Sterling's mouth opened and closed soundlessly like a fish pulled from water. His hands trembled as he reached for his phone, desperate to call lawyers, fixers, anyone who might save him. "I wouldn't do that," Mitchell said, producing her own federal credentials. "Detective Sarah Mitchell, CIA Counterterrorism Division. This entire conversation has been recorded under federal surveillance authority." The restaurant erupted in chaos. Other diners pulled out phones to record the scene. Staff members gathered to watch Sterling's downfall, and his own security team stood frozen, unsure whether to protect a man being arrested by federal agents. "This is impossible," Sterling whispered, his voice barely audible. "You're just a waitress. You're nobody." "I'm the nobody who's been documenting your terrorist financing for 3 months, Diane replied, producing handcuffs from her pocket. "Every conversation, every document, every racist comment, all evidence in a federal terrorism investigation." Sterling's world crumbled in real time. The woman he'd spat on, humiliated and dehumanized, was a federal agent who could send him to prison for life. His arrogance had blinded him to the most dangerous enemy he'd ever faced. "You have the right to remain silent," Diane began, moving behind Sterling's chair with practiced efficiency. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." "Wait!" Sterling's voice cracked with desperation. "This is all a misunderstanding. I never meant—" "You have the right to an attorney," Diane continued, snapping the handcuffs around his wrists with satisfying precision. "If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you." The clicking of metal on Sterling's wrists echoed through the silent restaurant like a death knell for his empire. Every patron, every staff member, every witness was recording the moment a billionaire's racism became his downfall. Sterling's security team finally moved, but toward the exits instead of their employer. They'd been hired to protect a businessman, not defend a terrorist. Their resignations were immediate and unanimous. "Do you understand these rights as I have read them to you?" Diane concluded, her voice carrying the full weight of federal authority. Sterling nodded weakly, his empire collapsing around him in real time. Financial accounts were being frozen, corporate assets seized, international warrants issued. The man who had commanded respect through fear and money was now just another criminal in handcuffs. As Diane led him toward the restaurant's exit, Sterling caught sight of himself in the mirrored walls. The reflection showed a broken man whose prejudice had destroyed everything he'd built. The same dining room where he'd humiliated a slow waitress was now witnessing his complete defeat. The woman he'd considered beneath notice held absolute power over his future. Justice wasn't just served, it was delivered personally by the person he'd tormented most. Outside, federal agents swarmed Sterling Enterprises' headquarters, while news crews broadcast his perp walk to the world. The viral video of him spitting on Diane played on every screen, ensuring his racist behavior would be remembered forever. Sterling's nightmare was just beginning. Diane's mission was complete. The handcuffs clicked shut around Sterling's wrists as the restaurant erupted in camera flashes and shocked gasps. The same dining room that witnessed his racist cruelty now recorded his complete humiliation. "Please," Sterling whispered, his voice cracking. "This is a misunderstanding. I was having a bad day. I'm not really—" "Not really what?" Diane asked coldly. "Not really a terrorist financier? I have 3 months of evidence proving otherwise." Sterling's legs buckled as reality crashed down. The billionaire who commanded fear through wealth was now stumbling in federal custody. "I can pay you," he said desperately. "50 million, whatever you want. Just make this disappear. Bribing federal agents, Mitchell noted on her tablet. Another felony charge. Wealthy diners recorded every moment of Sterling's downfall. The same people who watched his racist abuse in uncomfortable silence now documented his arrest with obvious satisfaction. Wellington appeared pale and shaking. "Mr. Sterling, I had no idea." "You're fired," Sterling snarled through his humiliation. "I own 15% of this place." "Actually," Mitchell consulted her seizure orders, "you own 0%. All terrorist-connected assets are frozen." Sterling's phone buzzed continuously. News spread like wildfire across social media. Stock prices collapsed, board members resigned, corporate partners terminated contracts within minutes. Outside, crowds gathered on sidewalks. News crews set up cameras while protesters held "Justice for Diane" signs. The viral spitting video played on smartphones held high above cheering masses. Federal agents loaded Sterling into an unmarked SUV. He caught sight of celebrating protesters and felt his remaining dignity evaporate. "This isn't over," he called to Diane. "I have lawyers, connections. You don't know who you're dealing with." "I know exactly who you are," Diane replied, meeting his eyes. "A terrorist financier who thought racism made him untouchable. You were wrong." The SUV pulled away toward federal detention while Sterling's empire burned. Within hours, FBI raids would hit Sterling Enterprises offices in 12 cities. Inside Le Chateau, staff gathered around Diane with awe and vindication. Maria Santos spoke first. "You were CIA this whole time, while he treated you like garbage?" 3 months of racist abuse, Diane confirmed, finally smiling. "Every insult, every "you people" comment recorded for federal prosecutors." Chef Rodriguez emerged, beaming. "That bastard complained about my cooking for months. Turns out the problem was his attitude." Wellington approached nervously. "Agent Carter, I never approved of Sterling's treatment." "You're fired," Diane said simply. "Le Chateau needs management that protects employees." Without Sterling's toxic presence, the restaurant atmosphere felt lighter, cleaner, and hopeful. Staff who endured systematic racism were finally free to work with dignity. Sterling's personal life disintegrated equally fast. Wife Patricia filed emergency divorce papers citing public embarrassment. His children changed names and distanced themselves from the family brand. His country club revoked membership within an hour. Charity boards terminated positions by emergency votes. His name was stripped from buildings and foundations nationwide. The federal detention center had processed wealthy criminals before, but rarely someone whose downfall was so public and satisfying. Guards struggled maintaining professional composure. In his holding cell, Sterling finally understood his situation's magnitude. The woman he humiliated for being too slow had methodically documented every crime. His prejudice had blinded him to his most dangerous enemy. His lawyers calculated the impossibility of defense. Federal terrorism charges carried mandatory minimums. Recorded confessions eliminated plea bargaining. Racist behavior destroyed jury sympathy hopes. News of his arrest spread globally. Sterling became a symbol of entitled racism meeting inevitable justice. The story resonated across cultures, proof that arrogance could bring down even the powerful. Diane's 3 months of suffering exposed a terrorist network worth hundreds of millions. Her patience and professionalism saved countless lives by preventing weapons reaching dangerous organizations. Justice was delivered with precision by the person Sterling underestimated most completely. 6 months later, the federal courthouse in Manhattan buzzed with international media attention as United States versus Richard Sterling began. The case had become a global symbol of justice overcoming racist privilege, drawing reporters from every major news network. The prosecution's evidence was overwhelming. Diane's 3-month undercover operation had produced recordings of Sterling discussing weapons deals with terrorist organizations, photographs of classified documents, and financial records tracing $200 million to Syrian rebel groups and Venezuelan cartels. But the most damaging evidence was the viral video of Sterling spitting on Diane while calling her too slow. The footage had been viewed over 300 million times, making Sterling's racist behavior impossible to deny or minimize. Lead prosecutor Amanda Rodriguez opened with devastating precision. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about a man who believed his wealth made him above the law and his racism made him invisible to justice. He was wrong on both counts. Sterling's defense team, led by Manhattan's most expensive criminal attorney, attempted damage control. They argued the racist comments were taken out of context, and the business deals were legitimate defense contracts misunderstood by investigators. The jury wasn't buying it. Agent Diane Carter took the witness stand on day 3, her testimony broadcast live across multiple networks. Wearing a crisp navy suit instead of a waitress uniform, she commanded the courtroom with quiet authority. For 3 months, I endured systematic racist abuse while gathering evidence of the defendant's terrorist financing operations, Diane testified. Every insult, every humiliation, every dehumanizing comment was carefully documented as part of a federal investigation. The defense attorney attempted to discredit her testimony. Agent Carter, isn't it true you deliberately provoked my client's reactions to build your case? I served soup and cleared tables, Diane replied evenly. If that provokes someone to spit on another human being while funding terrorism, the problem isn't my behavior. The courtroom gallery erupted in applause, quickly silenced by the judge's gavel. Sterling's foreign business associates testified under immunity agreements, describing his weapons deals in damning detail. The Eastern European contractor admitted delivering surface-to-air missiles to Syrian terrorists. The Venezuelan middleman detailed money laundering through Sterling's offshore accounts. Financial expert Dr. Sarah Kim presented charts showing Sterling's money flowing directly to organizations on international terrorism watch lists. The defendant personally authorized payments totaling $57 million to groups responsible for attacks that killed over 200 civilians. Each day brought new revelations. FBI cybercrime specialist Agent Marcus Thompson demonstrated how Sterling used encrypted communications to coordinate weapons shipments. International banking investigator Elena Vasquez traced dirty money through shell companies in 12 countries. But the most powerful testimony came from Sterling's own employees. His personal assistant revealed racist comments made in private meetings. His security chief described being ordered to intimidate minority employees. His accountant admitted helping hide terrorist-related payments. The jury heard recordings of Sterling saying, "These Syrian buyers don't care about paperwork. They just want weapons that kill efficiently." And, "Venezuelan cartels pay premium prices because they're desperate for American military hardware." On day 8, the prosecution played the restaurant surveillance footage in its entirety. The jury watched Sterling systematically humiliate Diane over 3 months. The water pouring incident, the forced standing, the verbal abuse, and finally the spitting. Several jurors wiped away tears as they witnessed the full scope of Sterling's cruelty. The man who claimed his racism was misunderstood was exposed as a calculating predator who enjoyed degrading people he considered inferior. Sterling's wife, Patricia, testified for the prosecution, revealing years of racist behavior at home. Richard regularly used racial slurs when discussing our household staff. He once said black people were genetically predisposed to laziness and criminality. The defense called character witnesses, but their testimony backfired spectacularly. A country club member admitted Sterling had advocated for excluding minority applicants. A business partner described him bragging about keeping workers in their place through intimidation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a Georgetown psychology professor, testified about the connection between racist dehumanization and criminal behavior. When someone consistently views others as less than human, it becomes easier to justify harming them through violence, exploitation, or in this case, providing weapons to kill them. International terrorism expert Colonel James Mitchell explained how Sterling's weapons deals directly enabled attacks on civilian targets. The defendant's surface-to-air missiles were used to shoot down a humanitarian aid flight in Syria, killing 12 doctors and nurses. The prosecution's closing argument was devastating. Richard Sterling didn't just commit terrorism. He profited from it while expressing racist contempt for his victims. He spat on a black woman for being too slow while rushing to deliver weapons that would murder innocent people faster. After 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all counts. conspiracy to commit terrorism, international weapons trafficking, money laundering, bribery of federal officials, and civil rights violations. Judge Patricia Williams, the first black female federal judge in Manhattan, delivered Sterling's sentence with historic gravity. Mr. Sterling, your crimes represent the intersection of racism and terrorism, two evils that have plagued our society for generations. Your systematic dehumanization of Agent Carter revealed the moral bankruptcy that enabled your terrorist financing. You spat on her because you believed your wealth and race made you untouchable. Today, justice proves you wrong. I sentence you to 35 years in federal prison without possibility of parole, plus $500 million in fines and victim restitution. The courtroom erupted in applause as Sterling collapsed into his chair, his face drained of color. His empire was gone, his freedom forfeit, his legacy forever linked to racism and terrorism. Federal marshals led him away in shackles as reporters broadcast his sentencing worldwide. The billionaire who had humiliated a slow waitress was now shuffling toward decades in maximum security prison. Outside the courthouse, Diane addressed a crowd of supporters and media. This case proves that justice doesn't recognize wealth, status, or skin color. It only recognizes the truth. Sterling's terrorist network was completely dismantled. Over 60 arrests followed across multiple countries. Weapons shipments worth $800 million were intercepted. Dozens of planned attacks were prevented. The man who believed racism made him invisible had become the most visible symbol of justice in a generation. His downfall began with spitting on the wrong waitress. It ended with a federal conviction that would echo through history. 2 years later, Agent Diane Carter stood before a packed auditorium at Georgetown University, delivering the keynote address for the Civil Rights and National Security Symposium. The same woman who had endured months of racist humiliation now commanded respect from intelligence officials, civil rights leaders, and students worldwide. "Dignity," she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the room, "isn't determined by your uniform, your paycheck, or the color of your skin. It's an inherent right that no amount of wealth or power can legitimately take away." Richard Sterling's maximum security cell at ADX Florence was a universe away from Le Chateau's crystal chandeliers. The former billionaire spent 23 hours daily in concrete isolation, his racist arrogance having cost him everything: freedom, family, fortune, and legacy. But Sterling's downfall had created systematic change. Le Chateau became a model for workplace dignity under new management. The Justice for Service Workers Act mandated federal hate crime protections. Corporate America implemented bias training programs after losing billions when customers demanded accountability. Diane's CIA promotion to deputy director made her the youngest person ever in the position. Her undercover techniques were now taught worldwide. The Sterling operation had become a case study in dismantling criminal networks through patient investigation. The international impact was equally significant. Sterling's network disruption prevented dozens of attacks. Weapons shipments worth over $1 billion were intercepted. Syrian humanitarian organizations credited the operation with saving hundreds of lives. Most meaningfully, the case shifted public consciousness about everyday racism. The #Justice for Diane movement evolved into broader social awareness. Bystanders now felt empowered to intervene during discriminatory incidents. "We can't just talk about equality," Diane concluded her Georgetown speech. "We have to live it, defend it, and demand it from everyone around us." As applause filled the auditorium, Diane delivered her final challenge. The next time you witness someone being treated with disrespect because of their race, their job, or their background, will you be the bystander who stays silent, or will you be the person who stands up? Because you never know. The person being mistreated might just be the one with the power to change everything. She paused, letting the words sink in. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell for more incredible true stories of justice overcoming injustice. Like this video if you believe everyone deserves dignity regardless of their job or background. Share this with someone who needs to know that bullies always get what's coming to them. Comment below. Have you ever stood up to discrimination? What happened when you did? Subscribe now for more stories proving justice may be delayed, but it's never denied when good people refuse to stay silent. Remember, she concluded, respect isn't earned through submission. It's commanded through strength, character, and the courage to never accept less than your full humanity. What would you do if faced with that choice? Because someday, somehow, we all face that choice. The screen faded to black with final statistics. Sterling sentenced to 35 years, terrorist network dismantled, 200-plus lives saved, and Diane Carter, the slow waitress who changed the world.